Now that you have an interesting sculpture to work with, you want to light it from the side and get some interesting shadow shapes and light shapes to work with. Also take photos at different angles, which will give you lots of different options to work with when coming up with a composition. In your thumbnails, test out several different compositions. Zoom in, zoom out, try some that are vertical, some that are horizontal, and be sure to also map in your dark shapes and your light shapes. That's essential to understanding how your composition is going to work. Once you have a composition that you like, you're going to be ready to move to your larger piece of paper. I'm going to start with a quick introduction on the materials that we're going to be using for this project. So we're going to begin by toning your paper. You're going to use your compressed charcoal for that. So that's the darker charcoal, and you're going to lay that on its side and add layers of compressed charcoal, and then use your chamois to go ahead and smooth it out. Once you're ready to start drawing in your drawing on your paper, you're going to begin with your vine charcoal. Now the vine charcoal is nice. You can take out a stick, you can break that apart. This is a much lighter form of charcoal. This is essentially like if you took little sticks, baked them in the oven, and then just took it out and drew with it. The vine charcoal is very light. You can almost erase it just with your finger. So you're going to start your drawing off with that, because if you put something in and you don't like it, you can just draw, take your chamois, so you don't like that line, just go ahead and blot it out, okay? So we're going to be working on a toned surface. You're going to tone your papers with that compressed charcoal, and then you're going to be erasing out your lights. If you want to erase something out really lightly, say in your reflected light sections, you want to knock back the value just a little bit, you can use your kneaded eraser, okay? And if you want to erase something out and get some of those bright highlights, you can take your eraser. Now I've been using it with charcoal, so it's very black, but you can take your big block eraser, your white eraser, and you can cut it. I have an X-Acto blade, so I'm going to use that. You can cut it into this chunk that you can use to do block out big sections, and you can also use it going on its edge to erase out little details. That's a quick introduction on materials. Now let's get started talking about the drawing. For these drawings, we're going to start by toning our paper. Take a piece of your compressed charcoal, lay it on its side, and rub the paper's surface. You're then going to take your chamois and you're going to smooth it out. Do that several times, both adding new layers of compressed charcoal and smoothing it out in order to get a mid-tone on your paper. Begin by mapping your drawing out using vine charcoal. Vine charcoal is easy to erase. Once you're ready to keep your drawing, go over it with your compressed charcoal. Then begin mapping in the shadow masses, so that's the entire shadow shape. From there, you're going to work from the darkest end of the value scale into the lighter end of the value scale. Once you've established your shadows, you can start to erase out the light masses. In the light, you want to make sure that your highlights are reading as light enough and bright enough. Sometimes you can end up erasing out too much, so in the next clip we're going to go over some techniques into how to reintroduce some tone. Alright everyone, I'm at a stage in my drawing where I'm beginning to erase out the light sections. I started with a big chunky eraser like this. You probably have a white eraser that looks like this, but I've cut it down into chunks that I can use and kind of adapt as I need for my drawing. What I like about when I've cut it down into chunks is that I can take this little chunk and I can start to block out big sections of light using the whole side of the eraser. Okay, so it's great for blocking out larger sections, but then I can also turn it on its edge and start to go into areas of bright light or that highlight. Pressing down hard, I can get that luminous bright highlight to come out. So you can use it both for mapping in larger sections of light and also details of highlight. And in the highlight area, I'm going to go into here. There's a brighter light kind of following the core shadow, so it's brighter in here, so I'm pressing down harder with my eraser. Now this is also a lighter section, but it starts to get a starts to go more towards a kind of mid-tone light. So I'm going to fade that out using the whole side of my eraser, and I'm having a softer touch. Okay. Alright, now I can go back and make that highlight even a little bit brighter. So for areas that you want to be brighter, press down harder with your eraser. Use the whole side of your eraser to get out bigger sections of light, and use the edge of your eraser, that hard edge, to work on detail portions. Okay. So in here I have erased out too much light. There's a highlight in here where that ridge is popping up. There's also some highlight in here where this ridge is also popping up, but in here it's a little indented. So again, I'm going to use my charcoal pack chamois. I'm going to take this in here and start to add in some tone. Okay, so getting a soft kind of mid-tone like this will be really difficult to try to do if you're going in straight with compressed charcoal. You could also do some sort of gradual values with vine charcoal, so vine charcoal would be nice for this, or your chamois is going to be great for adding in a little bit of tone. So I've added some tone back in. Okay, and I'm also looking at my photo reference and seeing that it gets slightly darker in here, so I'm very lightly adding some charcoal. You can also, again, go back in with that chamois, kind of smooth it out. And then I can go back into those areas that I want to be more of an intense highlight with my chunk of an eraser that I cut from my larger eraser and start to work those out again. And be careful trying to rub these bits of eraser away or charcoal away with your fingers. That's going to, you can end up accidentally smearing a larger dark area into that area that you want to keep light. So if you also have a soft brush, you can use that to brush off bits of eraser. So my drawing is now at a point where I think it's finished. I want to point out some things for all of you to consider with your own drawings and when they might be finished. So first, I've emphasized my core shadows so I can see those clearly. You want to emphasize both core shadows and the occlusion shadows you're seeing. Occlusion shadows are going to happen when either your form is sitting on top of something. In this crop, I can't see that with this view, but it also can happen when there's folds with your clay, and those folds are blocking out any light from going into that area. So core shadows, occlusion shadows, my reflected light is visible. The reflected light, remember, is happening in the shadow areas where there's light coming down, reflecting back into that shadow area, and that's going to help your object look three-dimensional. So core shadow, occlusion shadow, reflected light. And I've also adjusted my light areas to where there's some variations in those tones. So before, some of the light had gotten a little bit blown out. I had erased out too much. Now I've gone back in, added some different tones, some different variation in light, which also makes those areas of highlight stand out. So you want to address those different parts of both the shadow and light family. Last thing, I've also added some interesting things into my background. So I'm playing with going into these dark areas of charcoal, erasing out light, and adding some type of design back in there. So those are the elements you want to consider with your own projects to really make sure that your projects are finished.
The stages.
Let's review the stages. So start by toning your paper, have your thumbnails out for reference, and also have your photo reference out to continually look at as well. Map your drawing in using vine charcoal. Remember, fine charcoal is very easy to erase. You can even just go over it with your chamois. Once you like your drawing, go over your lines with compressed charcoal. Then start to map in your shadow masses. Work from the darkest end of the value scale, your core shadows, your occlusion shadows, and then work your way into the light. Once you've established your shadows, you can start to erase out more of your light mass and block in a dark background. For this drawing, I also want you to add an interesting design or element into the background. Use your eraser and go into that black charcoal. In the finishing stages of your drawing, make sure your core shadow is clear, occlusion shadows, your direct light, and your highlights. Make sure all of that light logic and value structure is evident in the final version.